Hello everyone, this is another video about Rundeck. This time I will be talking about Ansible in particular, because it's one of the most popular configuration management tools and it's probably a good idea to use it along with Rundeck. On top of it, Ansible is part of Rundeck delivery and it's delivered as a plugin, so it's not that tough to start using it from scratch. The only thing you need to have is the Rundeck image with Ansible inside of it. Other than that, the whole configuration is there. So this is what we'll be trying to achieve in this video. The goal is to just create a simple playbook that will install Rundeck on some distant VM. And in my case it will be just a VM on my VirtualBox on my laptop, but it will emulate some regular activities using Rundeck and Ansible. And as always, all the materials I'm using are published on my GitHub, and for this particular video it will be the 9th folder. And again, as in all the series from Rundeck, there is a helm chart that you could use on your Kubernetes cluster, and it's still the same chart that was used for all the videos. It's just being improved per each episode. So I added the Ansible specific features, let's say, to this chart. One of it is that we have now some extra settings for Ansible in particular. So first of all, we need to use Ansible or provide Ansible inventory, Ansible config, and Ansible key, which will be the key that the virtual machine that we want to connect is configured with. So our SSH connection will be using this key. Another thing is that I had to create some extra Docker file for Rundeck, so it's pretty the same as I was using in the past, but with some additional step that is basically installing Ansible, so that you can run all the Ansible goodies inside of the Rundeck image. So let's first start the Rundeck on the local Kubernetes cluster using the helm chart that I was just describing. I'm using a K3s cluster, so everything is working on my laptop, same as the target VM that I will be using to install another Rundeck. So let's first try to install Rundeck with the values file I prepared. I can show you in a second how it actually looks like. So first of all, as I said, I'm using the Ansible image for this particular job. I'd like to also expose the service over a load balancer on this particular port. And as in previous video, I'm providing admin token and password to admin user. Also, I'm setting the Rundeck Grails URL, which is the IP that K3s will be assigning to the service. And then there are those three parameters made specially for Ansible. So first one is the Ansible inventory. I'm pointing to the local VirtualBox VM and just providing the parameters to the SSH connection. It will be private key connection and the key will be in this particular path, which is defined by the helm chart. And then I'm setting some Ansible config parameters. The most important is the host key checking. This is important because the Rundeck image is not aware of the VMs that it will be using, so all the host key checking will be failing basically, so I'm disabling it. And the deprecation warnings are also disabled because I'm using very old Ubuntu. That's why I don't want to see like the messy messages in the output logs of Ansible. And then there is just a SSH key that will be used for the connection. It was just generated for the purpose of this video, and just and the public key was copied to the target VM so that I can connect with this private key to this local VM. And that's it. We should already see the Rundeck running, so let's get the service to see if everything is fine. And it seems to be okay, so let's just copy the IP. and we can try to connect to the Rundeck on Kubernetes cluster. We can log in there, and just let's start with creating example project. And the first thing that is really nice about all this Ansible stuff that you can use on Rundeck is that you can actually define the nodes for Rundeck in using Ansible inventory, and to do that you just need to add special type of resource model, which is Ansible resource model. And because all the configuration is copied to the default Ansible directory, so etc Ansible, we don't really need to configure anything extra here because it will be read by default. If you have some parameter somewhere else, you would probably need to pass the path to the exact files here. But as I said, in our case, it should work out of the box. So let's just unselect the errors part so that we can see what's going on. We also have the SSH connection configured already because we passed all the settings in the inventory file. But if you want to use some different connection for some particular inventory, or the parameters of SSH connections were not defined, you would probably need to configure how this particular hosts in your inventory are supposed to be connected. So not much changes here in my case. I will just save it and save it here. And in nodes, we can now see our brand new node added to the inventory. As you can see, it's here. So apart from the Rundeck itself, we have the Ubuntu machine available. So let's now try to create some example job and try to run the Ansible itself. So we'll create new job. It will be called install Rundeck because this is exactly what we want to do. In workflow, there are at least two types of workflows that we can use for Ansible. There is inline workflow, inline playbook, and the playbook itself we will be using inline playbook, so the one where we can pass the playbook content from the file. And again, we don't need to configure any Ansible base directory because we are using the default location thanks to the helm chart. So let's now copy just the playbook, which is in the setup Rundeck file. I'll copy it here. Just very quickly we can go through the steps. So I'm just adding Rundeck repository, then installing all the dependencies with Rundeck with the specified version. Then what we do is to try to configure the packet forwarding using IP tables so that the fixed port of Rundeck can be somehow overridden. So we will expose the Rundeck over 80 port, but on the machine itself it will be forwarded to the Rundeck default port. Then we are adding Rundeck user, creating some directories, setting the admin password and this Grails URL that can be passed as environment variable, but in this case I'll be just setting it in Rundeck config. And then there is a handler that will be restarting Rundeck after some major changes. So that's basically it. We also have some extra variables that we want to pass there. Those are like parameters of the installation that we will just run in a second, and there is a special place for it here. So again, we will be setting password as admin, and then this is the version of Rundeck that will be installed, and the Grails IP will be set to this IP, which is the IP of the VM that we are using here. And of course we don't need to pass any extra parameters here. because the SSH connection and inventory is in default location. If you want to use some other location, you would have to pass here the inventory file. So same as running from command line, you will have to pass the -i parameter with the file containing inventory. And other than that, everything is configured already. So we can save it and create a job. So if we now try to run it, it will fail, but I want to explain why it will fail. So as you can see, the problem is that there is no matching host that would be sufficient to run this job. And this is caused by the fact that the Rundeck is adding the limit parameter to the end of the Ansible playbook command. So inventory is like the source for all the hosts, but then you can limit on which host the job should actually run. And this is exactly what Rundeck is doing. And that's why we need to also configure what exactly or where exactly the job should be executed. And we can do it by going to the nodes definition, and here we need to select dispatch nodes, and we can basically pass the node that we are interested in. It can be the group, but in our case it's the only host in the inventory, so we need to explicitly select it. And now if we save it and execute the job once again, it should be fine. As you can see, all the steps now are executed. It will take a couple of seconds, so I will just jump to the end of the execution. After a while, we can see that the Rundeck installation was successful. All the steps from the playbook was executed, and we should have our Rundeck available on the IP of the VM. So let's try to reach it. And as you can see, this fresh instance of Rundeck that we just installed, and we can do some new stuff with the newly created tool.